thought I was lazy, but the truth is, I was just lost in a brain that never learned how to sit still. The light from my phone was the only thing glowing at 1:42 a.m. The rest of the room felt like a paused movie. Half-folded clothes, a half-written text, a cold cup of coffee I kept forgetting to drink. TikTok kept scrolling for me. That soft voice came on. You might have ADHD if you do this. I didn't blink. I didn't breathe. I just watched myself appear on someone else's screen. I didn't cry. That would have made it real. Instead, I exhaled like a truth had been quietly living under my ribs for years, waiting to be named. They didn't know me, but they described me better than anyone I've ever loved. And I wasn't offended. I was relieved. Is that strange? To be grateful an algorithm knew your patterns better than your parents ever did? I remember saving the video, then replaying it, then scrolling to find more. Each one felt like a confession I didn't know I had in me. You might have time blindness. You probably hyperfixate on tasks, then burn out. You seem fine on the outside, but your mind is sprinting laps. They said it like it was okay. And for a second, maybe two, I felt okay. The next morning, I told my friend half a joke about it. Might have ADHD, I laughed. Explains a lot. But inside, I wasn't laughing. Inside, I was whispering, please say it's true. Please say this means I'm not broken, just miswired. She shrugged, said, isn't that what everyone says these days? And that hurt more than I expected, because suddenly the screen that made me feel seen felt like a two-way mirror. I could see myself, but could anyone else? I started replaying my entire childhood like a diagnostic checklist. The unfinished science projects, the report cards that said, bright but distracted. The way I used to cry after social events without knowing why. Was that it? Was that always it? And if so, why didn't anyone notice sooner? Here's the twist that I haven't told anyone yet. I started feeling nostalgic for my own confusion, because at least back then, I didn't know what to call it. Now that I had a word, a possible word, I couldn't stop using it to explain myself. But in doing that, I started wondering if I was explaining myself away. TikTok became my therapist. Reddit became my echo chamber. My notes app turned into a graveyard of symptoms, not stories. Every quirk became a clue. Every bad day felt like confirmation. And suddenly, I was grieving the version of me who just thought she was a little weird. It's weird, isn't it? To feel seen by strangers, but invisible to yourself. I Googled how to get diagnosed. The wait list was 6 months, so I kept watching videos, and they kept diagnosing me better than any form ever could. The algorithm became my comforter, my confidant, my late-night label maker. But here's the thing no one warns you about when you start figuring yourself out at 2 a.m. through a cracked screen. You don't just find answers, you find identity. And sometimes, you cling to the answer so tightly, you forget to ask if it's the whole truth. There was a moment, and I remember it so clearly, when I caught myself pausing a video and whispering, "That's me." But I wasn't sure if I was celebrating or surrendering. Because if this label explains everything, does that mean I'll never be more than it? The coffee was still cold, still sitting on the same desk, untouched, unbothered. Like a metaphor I didn't mean to write, like a version of myself I kept forgetting to care for. I think the hardest part about digital diagnosis is that no one sits with you after. You just close the app, turn off the screen, and return to a life that still doesn't know what you just learned. My parents didn't notice. My coworkers didn't ask. I was different, but not in a way anyone could name. Only the algorithm had a name for me, and for a while, that was enough. Until it wasn't. Because here's the ache I don't know where to put. Is it still healing? If the only one who understands you is an algorithm. I didn't find myself that night. I just stopped feeling like a stranger to my own pain. I used to say things like, "Sorry, my brain's chaotic," and laugh, like it was cute, like the way I forgot things, or said too much, or panicked in silence, was charming. But I think I stopped being a person and started being a collection of symptoms. The shift was slow, like fog moving in. At first, it felt like relief, having a reason for the mess. Then it became an excuse, and somewhere along the way, it turned into identity. I started saying it like it was my name. My OCD's acting up again. I'm just neurodivergent. I have rejection sensitivity. It's why I'm spiraling. But here's the confession that sat in my throat for months. I wasn't sure if I was managing my symptoms or becoming them. Every sentence I spoke came with a diagnostic disclaimer. Every fear I had became a meme I saved. Every meltdown I masked with irony. Because if you say, "I'm unwell, lol," people laugh instead of leave. At some point, my healing became performance art. And the audience, an algorithm, a group chat, a Reddit thread, anyone but me. 1. You scroll through 20 videos a night, but haven't seen a real therapist once. It starts as curiosity, then comfort, then craving. You're not learning to get better. You're learning how to explain yourself better. To your friends, to your feed, to yourself at 2 a.m. You say, "This sounds like me," so often. You forget to ask, "Do I want this to be me?" And when the screen turns black, you're still lying there. Not diagnosed, not dismissed, just drowning in possibilities. 2. You start seeing symptoms in everyone, even when they're just being human. Your coworker zones out in meetings, you think ADHD. Your friend cancels plans. You whisper social anxiety. Your situationship avoids labels, must be avoidant attachment. But maybe they're just tired, or scared, or healing too. The truth is, sometimes diagnosis gives us control, but sometimes it becomes a shield. Because it's easier to name a behavior than sit with the ache of not being chosen. 3. You use diagnosis memes to connect, but feel more alone than ever. You repost jokes about spiraling. You laugh at the ones that say, "mentally ill baddie." You drop "LOL I'm broken" in comment sections like a secret handshake. But deep down, you're not laughing. You're hoping someone will DM you and say, "Me too, but I see you beyond it." Because validation without intimacy still feels like silence. 4. You flinch when someone questions your label because it's all you have. If someone says, "Maybe it's not ADHD, maybe it's burnout," or "Do you think that's really depression or just loneliness?" you tense. Not because they're wrong, but because you don't know who you are without the label. When your identity has become a symptom sheet, healing starts to feel like erasure, and you're not ready to lose the only thing that's ever explained your ache. I started calling myself a mentally ill baddie on TikTok, half joke, half prayer, the kind that gets likes, the kind that hides the tears behind aesthetic filters and trending audios. I curated my pain like a brand, vented in carousels, posted reels with captions like, "Still healing, still hot." And I meant it, but also, I didn't. Because underneath the aesthetics, there was a girl staring at the screen wondering if anyone would love her without the trauma plot. I remember standing in the bathroom, toothbrush in hand, Googling, "Can you be faking symptoms and not know it?" That search broke something in me, because I wasn't faking, but I was afraid of being someone without a label. The cold coffee from part 1, still on the desk, now surrounded by sticky notes with symptoms written like affirmations, as if saying them enough times would make me feel more real. But labels don't hold you when you cry. They don't ask how your day was. They don't remind you that you're more than this. They just loop over and over on your For You page, on your thoughts, until even your silence sounds rehearsed. It's strange how pain can become comforting, how the ache becomes familiar, how the diagnosis becomes home, even if the door never quite fits. And the thing that scares me most? I started to miss myself, not the healed me, the me before I needed to be figured out to feel understood. I told someone once, if I'm not this, then who am I? And they looked at me like I asked the wrong question, but it was the only one I had. I think I got so obsessed with understanding myself that I stopped experiencing myself, started watching my life like a case study instead of living it. And maybe, just maybe, healing isn't about knowing what's wrong. It's about remembering what still feels right. I changed my journal last week, not the cover, the questions. Instead of, what triggered me today? I wrote, what made me feel like myself today? One answer, dancing in the kitchen. No camera, no post, just movement. Another, answering a text without overthinking punctuation. Small things, but they felt like warmth, like pieces of me returning, unlabeled. The coffee's still cold, but this time I poured it out, made a new cup, and drank it, warm. Not because I had to, but because I wanted to. It didn't feel like healing. It felt like being categorized, like someone had finally placed a paper tag on my soul, scribbled something on it in marker and said, there, now you make sense. I didn't know whether to thank them or run. The first time someone called me so OCD, they were smiling. It was after I fixed the pillow arrangement on their couch. Again, I smiled too, but something in me winced, because even though they didn't mean it to sting, it still did. The label fit. But only from the outside, only in curated moments. And deep down, I wanted someone to ask, does fixing things make you feel safe? Not just, wow, you're so organized. It's strange. The things people applaud can be the exact things you do to keep from falling apart. I started wearing the label like armor because it kept people from misreading me, because it made my quirks easier to digest, because it gave me the illusion of understanding. But over time, it started to itch. I wasn't just anxious. I was generalized anxiety disorder. I wasn't just sensitive. I was highly sensitive person. I wasn't just human. I was a checklist, a string of acronyms. And somewhere between the DSM and the memes, I started losing the softness of who I was. Carl Rogers once said, labels don't heal people. Safe spaces do. I read that quote at 3 a.m. It stopped me cold, because I realized I'd been collecting diagnoses like survival tokens, hoping one would buy me belonging. But belonging doesn't come from being explained. It comes from being held. No one had held me. Not really. Only the internet. And even that felt like touch through glass. I remember writing in my journal, maybe the paper tag isn't a tattoo. Maybe it's just temporary. And then I cried. Not because I was sad, but because I had finally allowed the possibility that I didn't have to be defined forever by the worst days of my life. The paper tag metaphor wouldn't leave me alone. It kept showing up. On my sticky notes, in dreams, in the mirror, the foggy one I still hadn't cleaned. One night I tried to rip the label off, not literally, emotionally. I said out loud, I'm not just my anxiety. And the silence that followed felt like both a relief and a loss. Because if I'm not anxious girl, then who am I when I'm calm? When the panic stops? When the symptoms fade? Do I still get to belong in the rooms I once walked into with a diagnosis like a name tag on my chest? The question haunted me, so I avoided it. I started over-explaining again. Sorry, I'm just neurodivergent. I'm OCD, that's why I can't let this go. I have rejection sensitivity. It's not personal. It was easier to be a diagnosis because that came with instructions. It came with empathy. It came with clout, online at least. But the deeper truth? I was tired. Tired of performing my pain so people would stay. Tired of walking into conversations already labeled, pre-justified, pre-defended. I just wanted to be asked, what made you feel loved today? Instead of, what's your latest coping mechanism? I wanted to be a person, not a condition. So I wrote one more thing in my journal. I'm not trying to be cured, I'm trying to be understood. That sentence stayed with me. It softened something, not all at once, but like light leaking under a locked door. And maybe that's what healing really is. Not a transformation, not a fix, just a quiet return to softness. I'm not saying labels are bad. They saved me once, but they were meant to be a bridge, not a home. The paper tag? It's still here, still fluttering. But now, it feels optional, like a name you once answered to but no longer need. I didn't delete the apps. I just stopped opening them first thing in the morning. There wasn't a dramatic goodbye, just a quiet choice, the kind that doesn't earn applause, but shifts something inside you. I used to wake up and scroll, swipe diagnosis after diagnosis, relate, repost, repeat, until I couldn't tell where the algorithm ended and I began. But one morning, my thumb hovered over the app, and I clicked notes instead, not to track symptoms, not to overanalyze, just to ask myself a question I hadn't in months. What made me smile yesterday? The answer was stupidly small. I laughed when my ramen exploded in the microwave, but I wrote it down, and for the first time in a long time. My identity wasn't a problem to solve. It was a person to remember. I stopped labeling every experience. Stopped saying, my OCD made me do this. My ADHD ruined my schedule. My anxiety is flaring up. I started saying, I feel overwhelmed. I got distracted. I'm tired today. It was subtle, but it gave me permission to be a person again, not a walking disclaimer. 3 small things I changed that started changing me. 1, I let silence be normal again. For months, I couldn't sit in quiet without spiraling, but now I let it happen. The stillness. No playlist, no diagnosis memes, no TikTok voiceovers, just the hum of the fridge, the sound of my breath, and sometimes the gentle realization this silence isn't empty, it's safe. 2, I journaled without tracking anything. No symptom checkboxes, no mood graphs. Just sentences like, I missed her today. I felt proud of myself for folding the laundry. I want to call someone, but I don't know who. It wasn't productivity. It was presence. 3, I allowed joy to show up without permission. I didn't wait to feel better to do the things I love. I just did them, even with the ache. Painting without skill, dancing without posting, laughing at a meme without needing it to explain my trauma. The shift wasn't loud, but it was holy, because I started realizing you can have anxiety and still have peace. You can have a diagnosis and still have identity. You can be healing and still hold joy. That was never mutually exclusive. I was just never taught that I was allowed to be both. At first, I was scared, like I was betraying the version of me who fought so hard for recognition, the one who needed the label to be heard, the one who survived by memorizing the language of pain. But then I looked in the mirror, the same foggy one, and for the first time, I didn't just see symptoms. I saw me. Not perfect, not healed, just me, still anxious, still spiraling sometimes, but also gentler, quieter inside, soft enough to hold both pain and progress in the same breath. I told a friend, I'm not anti-diagnosis. I just don't want to need it to explain every part of me anymore. She nodded, then hugged me and said, You've always been more than it. Tea hat hugs stayed longer than the therapy clips ever did. The cold coffee, now warm, half drunk, not forgotten, not symbolic, just a drink, and that's healing too. When the metaphors become real again, I think the paper tag is still around here somewhere, folded, not torn. I didn't need to rip it off in defiance. Just gently move it to the side. Because I'm not erasing that part of me, I'm just learning not to lead with it. Sometimes the label protects you, like a soft sweater in winter. Other times, it becomes a cage, comfortable, familiar, but slowly shrinking around you. I didn't notice it tightening at first. It felt like self-awareness. It felt like being informed. It felt like control. Until one day, I sat at my desk and realized I hadn't written a single creative sentence in weeks. Only journal entries that started with, "My anxiety is bad again," or "I think my OCD is flaring." The labels gave me language. But somewhere along the way, they took my voice. I stopped asking, "What do I want today?" and started asking, "What's wrong with me this week?" It was subtle, but every time I opened my notes app, I was already assuming something was broken, that something needed tracking, fixing, naming. I stopped living forward and started living under diagnosis, like a cloud that followed me, even on the sunny days. And here's the ache that surprised me most. When I had good days, I didn't trust them. I'd say, "Must be a dopamine spike," or "I'm just in a hyperfixation bubble." I couldn't enjoy joy without running it through the filter of pathology. And that broke me in a new way. Because the cage wasn't made of metal. It was made of words I clung to for safety. Words I once whispered like mantras, now echoing like questions. Is this who I really am? Or just who I've learned to be? To be accepted? There's a special kind of loneliness in being hyper self-aware. You catch every tick, you name every feeling, you trace every trauma, but you forget how to be soft in the not knowing. That's when I realized maybe I've been so busy explaining myself, I forgot to experience myself. There's a line I never wrote down but felt in my bones. Healing got so clinical, I forgot it was supposed to feel human. So I did something strange. I poured out the coffee, the one I kept reheating over and over, then filled the mug with water. Nothing symbolic, just simple, clear. And it made me wonder, what would my life look like if I stopped clinging to every acronym as if it were a life jacket? I don't want to villainize labels. They saved me, held me in the dark, gave me a name when all I had were symptoms and shame. But they were never meant to define my worth, just explain my wounds. And I think I confused the two. There's something terrifying about letting go of the thing that once saved you, even if it's not saving you anymore. Because once you stop saying, "This is who I am," and start saying, "This is who I was when I was surviving," you realize there's no script for who comes next, just a blank page. And that can feel like loss or freedom, depending on the day. The journal I used to fill with checklists, it's empty this week, but it doesn't feel like failure. It feels like breath, like space, like maybe, finally, my life isn't being tracked. It's being lived. Sometimes I still feel the tug, like the label is knocking, asking to be worn again, but I don't answer so quickly anymore. I let the moment breathe. I ask, am I naming this out of truth or out of fear? Because there's a difference between knowing your patterns and becoming them. And if I keep rehearsing my trauma, keep introducing myself as anxious or broken or chronically something, then healing has nowhere to go, no room to unfold. The cage door was never locked, but I forgot I could push. And when I did, when I stepped outside, I didn't find perfection. I found presence. I stood in front of that foggy mirror again, but this time I didn't analyze. I just watched my chest rise and fall, not for insight, just to know I was still here, still healing, still human, but not just a diagnosis anymore. I'm still messy, still forget where I put my keys, still leave texts on read for reasons I don't always understand. But now, I notice the silence in the room and don't rush to fill it with an explanation. I don't lead with my diagnosis anymore. I lead with my breath. There was a time when I believed healing had to be loud, visible, trackable, prove it on paper kind of healing. Now, it feels more like sitting on the floor with a warm cup of tea and whispering, "I'm not a project, I'm a presence." The cold coffee? I don't keep making it anymore. I make tea. Not because it's symbolic, just because I've started choosing things that make me feel held, not just awake. That's how I know I'm changing. Not because my symptoms vanished, but because I stopped using them as proof of existence. The girl I was before the diagnosis, she still lives in me, not as a ghost, but as a root. She wasn't broken. She was just waiting for someone to understand her without dissecting her. I thought I had to become someone new, but all this time, healing has been a remembering. I used to flinch at compliments, used to joke them off. "I'm just faking it well." Or, "You mean my trauma response is slaying again?" But now, sometimes, I just say thank you and let it land. Because the version of me that lived only in labels, she needed the applause to feel real. The version of me now, she's real even in silence. The paper tag? I didn't burn it, didn't throw it away. I folded it, placed it gently in the back of my drawer, not to erase what it meant, but to say, "You helped me survive, but you're not the only thing keeping me alive." Some nights I still feel the ache, still wonder, what if it comes back? But I don't spiral like I used to. I light a candle, breathe into the fear, and say, if it does, I'll meet it differently now. Because I know myself, not as a diagnosis, but as a person, a soul, a story still unfolding. I started a new journal, not for tracking, just for truth. The first page, one word, here. That's all it needed, not a list, not a goal, just presence. I no longer need to earn rest with productivity. I no longer need to justify joy with disclaimers. I no longer need to perform healing, because sometimes stillness is enough. The foggy mirror, I cleaned it, not because I wanted clarity, but because I deserved to see myself fully without distortion. What I saw wasn't flawless, but it was real, present, me. The world didn't applaud. There were no viral posts, no voiceovers, just a quiet room and the sound of my breath, finally belonging to me. You thought the diagnosis named you, but names are just echoes of a truth deeper than language. You are not your survival strategy. You are the one who kept walking, even when the path was unlabeled. I'm still anxious some days, still sensitive to tone, still figuring things out. But now, I lead with curiosity, not control, and that changes everything. Because I'm not trying to fix myself anymore. I'm learning to love the parts I once tried to diagnose away. This isn't the end of healing, it's the beginning of home. If this story found you at 2 a.m., if you've ever felt like your pain was the only thing that made you real, I just want you to know, there's a version of you the world hasn't met yet. Not because she's hiding, but because you're still becoming her. If even one line stayed with you, don't rush to comment, just breathe. And when you're ready, drop a sopas below to say, I'm still here, still healing, still becoming. No pressure, no fixing, just presence. This space was never about perfection, only permission.